Hello everybody, SlimKirby here, and welcome to the next Mario Party minigame ranking video. I hope you guys have really been enjoying these videos so far, as I've had an absolute blast making them. And today, we're not just completing another game, but we're also finishing an era of Mario Party by doing the final Nintendo 64 title, Mario Party 3. Now, I know I've given Mario Party 3 a hard time in the past. Trust me, the comments I got in my ranking video where I ranked the game 8th of the main 10 Mario Party games definitely made that clear. And although I consider myself someone to not pull any punches when it comes to something entirely subjective and something analytical like this, I'm also someone who is willing to admit that maybe I wasn't seeing the full picture, and I do think in 2016 that may have been the case with me. I still wouldn't put it in my top 3, but I can consider it a top 5 contender at least, because it does offer quite a substantial package here. We got 6 more boards, 2 new characters, an expansion to the item system, an entire new mode variation in the form of the dueling boards, the series' first story mode, and, in the context of what we'll be looking at today, 70 new minigames to play. And unlike Mario Party 2, there are no returning minigames this time around. This will no doubt be the longest list so far, until we get to the top 100 in Superstars anyway. And we have a lot to go through, so I'm not going to try and waste any more of your time and get things moving. As usual, the minigames that will be considered for this list are the standard end-of-turn minigames, battle minigames, item minigames, duel minigames, the minigames you play on Game Guy spaces, and the 2 rare minigames Dizzy Dingies and Stardust Battle. I know Party Puzzle Pro is also considered a rare minigame, but since it's just a single-player variation of a 4-player minigame, I'll acknowledge it alongside that game when it appears in the list. So, well, without further ado, let's get this list started. Number 70. Our last place finisher this time around is not a luck-based minigame, nor a game with horrific controls, nor is it even a button masher. However, this game is no doubt the most ill-conceived game in the entire package, and that game is MPIQ, the Mario Party Intelligence Quiz. I'm sorry, but I do not understand why this game came to be, and it's not even the fact that it's a quiz show. It's the fact that it's a quiz show based on inane facts that have no relevance in being tested in a Mario Party game. Yeah, there are some interesting questions in the pool, like you can find out that Princess Daisy is from the kingdom of Sarasaland, and if you pay attention to the current game in progress and certain statistics, that info can help you get a question or two. But there are certain questions that are completely unfair and only reward the person who owns the actual game cartridge. Stuff like, what's the record for this racing minigame? Or, how many times has Wario won at Woody Woods? Stuff that you wouldn't know without spending a few minutes looking at the game's statistical data before you even start playing, and who would seriously want to do that? I'm sorry, Mario Party 3, I don't know what the top score for Course 2 of Dizzy Dingies is on my friend's game cartridge. I don't even know what the record is on my own damn game, and I have no intention of memorizing that or any other random crap from the data room. Most people I know just randomly spam the A button and guess random things without even seeing the question, and if people would rather do that and turn the game into a luck-based minigame instead of an actual quiz show, that's really saying something. That tells me that this is easily the worst minigame in Mario Party 3, and I think it belongs at the very bottom of the list as a result. Number 69. Mario Party 3 introduces a great evil to the world of Mario Party, and thankfully this is the only game that this evil is featured in. And no, I'm not talking about the fake Millennium Star, I'm talking about Game Guy. Now, for those who are not in the know and who are wondering why Game Guy is such a pox on this world, what makes him and his minigames so bad? They are casino games, and naturally at casinos you either win big or win nothing at all. And that is pretty much the point, right? Well, except for the part where at casinos you can at least select the amount you want to bet, and in the case of Game Guy, that's just not enough for him, because no matter the coin amount, all of your coins will be up for the pot. And guess what? You can't even refuse once you land on his space. And all of his minigames just so happen to be luck-based minigames. So even if you are smart and try to play the odds in your favor, it's no guarantee, so I hope those coins you've been saving up weren't planned for anything, because you may not have a single one of them once Game Guy is finished with you. And for 69th place, I'm going with Game Guy's Roulettes. Why? Because of the 4 Game Guy minigames, I think this is the hardest one to win. Even the biggest section of the board only has roughly a 1/4 chance of being selected, and that's just not good enough for me when all of my coins are on the table. My only advice for you in this game is play it safe when Game Guy does try to throw a wrench in your plans, and only risk it big when you absolutely need a Hail Mary to change the game in your favor. After all, it doesn't hurt if you're already in an unlikely to win scenario, right? Number 68, MERRY-GO-CHOMP. I hate luck-based battle games. I really do. And Mario Party 3 decided to release another variation of Bowser's Big Blast. But instead of a giant Bowser bomb, we have a hungry Chain Chomp. But for the most part, this is just Bowser's Big Blast again. The odds are a little more consistent this time around, in that they technically don't get worse in each round and everyone has the same flat % chance of getting eaten, since the loser doesn't get revealed until everyone picks, but it still results in the same dreadful anticipation of who will get eliminated in each agonizing cycle. Also, one of the worst feelings is picking a safe color, seeing the Chain Chomp select the free space, and then choosing your color as his secondary option. Now that is a complete mood killer. Number 67, Stacked Deck. If one luck-based battle game wasn't enough for you, we have a second one in the form of Stacked Deck. In this game, you have a deck of cards with Toad, Boo, and Baby Bowser on them. All the cards get shuffled, get laid out, and one by one, you and your opponents pick a single card until everyone is eliminated by a Baby Bowser card, except the final player. You have no idea which cards are which, Toad cards are safe, and Boo will randomly shuffle the picking order. So if you are comfortable in the back, guess what? You may get moved to the front again if you get a Boo. Yeah, much like MERRY-GO-CHOMP, I hate getting this minigame. I will give it some credit for at least being an interesting premise and more unique than its fellow luck-based battler, but it features the very same dismay I have for it as well. Definitely 2 of the worst minigames that Mario Party 3 has to offer. Number 66, Bowser Toss. We're taking a break from luck-based minigames to focus on a button masher, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I may actually prefer Mecha Marathon over this game. Thankfully, you only have to mash one button in this game, but while you are going ham on the A button, you also need to angle yourself so you throw your giant Bowser figure farther than your opponent. Focusing on just one of the 2 control inputs can be a tricky endeavor, but trying to incorporate both just becomes an exercise of tedium. I can't feel like I can angle myself properly without slowing down my button mashing, and even when I do get the angle right, trying to hold it while mashing A just doesn't seem to work very well, usually resulting in some pretty subpar scores. This is one of the few minigames that I just can't seem to win against the hard CPUs, and hard isn't even the toughest difficulty either. Even if I look beyond that though, this is just not a very fun minigame for me, and not a great game to get for duels either. Number 65, End of the Line. Okay, let's get back to the luck minigame, shall we? And although this game isn't at the end of this list, it's pretty close to the bottom, I'd say. In this game, you duel against your opponent in a series of decisions to determine who can find the correct train route to lead their freight into the station before the other. You have 3 junctions to select from, and every time you select incorrectly, you have to start from the very beginning until you get all 3 paths correct. Now, what makes this game better than Stacked Deck and MERRY-GO-CHOMP is that you do at least have a chance to make a comeback if you do choose wrongly, so your fate is not necessarily determined by one wrong answer here, which is good. However, once someone makes it to Junction 3, what they decide there determines who wins, because if they pick wrongly, the other player pretty much knows the answer at that point. So in other words, it's still luck-based, and it's still one of the worst minigames. Number 64, Crazy COGS. I may not be a fan of Shock Drop or Roll in Mario Party 2, but I'll at least defend it over its much worse counterpart in Mario Party 3. The single player once again has the incredibly minimal job of moving a lever back and forth, while the other players run like hell on a spinning conveyor belt, while waves of bullet bills rain down on their heads. The single player's lever controls the spin of the cog, which affects the movement of the other players, so their job is to try and mess the team up until all 3 players get eliminated. Honestly, I really don't feel like the solo player needs to even do that much in this minigame because the bullet bills come down at an angle, so it's not inherently obvious when or where they are coming down, even if you look at their shadow. At the end of the day, it's just a giant struggle to see whether or not the team of 3 gets lucky enough to survive the harsh onslaught of ammunition for 30 seconds. Number 63, Baby Bowser Broadside. This honestly would and should be a better minigame, but the perspective here is really bad. Whichever team stands on the front and back of the screen has a huge starting advantage, and by the game's midpoint, it's just a chaotic mess to try and score whatever you can by shooting the target. Being unable to tell what you are aiming at half the time just makes this game really bad, and this is easily the worst 2 vs 2 minigame of the entire N64 era. Number 62, Tidal Toss. I really don't know who has the advantage in this game anymore because it's just a giant mess. The solo player tries to push the other players off the stage using tidal waves, and the team of 3 just tries to survive. The team has a hard time moving in this one, being slowed down by the water and having their horizontal jump movement cut down extremely. However, one thing I've really noticed about this game over the years is the invincibility frames will absolutely break this game for the team of 3. Even getting hit by a small little wave will give the players enough time to move through the next couple of waves and get enough momentum to be in front, allowing them to spam the jump button and give them plenty of openings to survive for the 30-second time limit. I get what the developers were going for here, turning it into a scenario where the solo player tries to mind game the rest of the players, but this game just ended up being a giant mess as a result. Number 61, Motor Rooter. Much like the last 2 games, here is another game that should be a lot better than it actually is. In this game, you move through a circular passageway with booster panels that will speed you up and electric walls that will slow you down. The goal is to be the first player to the end, and as a concept, this game is absolutely fine. What isn't is the controls, and I swear, moving in this game is an absolute nightmare. You see, you don't have full control over your vehicle here. You just move one lane at a time, and when the electric walls sneak up on you to the point where you need to move to a precise lane in only a second or 2 with the added stress of accidentally moving too far, it just makes this minigame very frustrating to play. And when a lot of coins could be on the line because it's a duel minigame, frustration is generally not what you want. Number 60, Hide and Sneak. In this game, the team of 3 tries to hide behind stage props while the single player tries to find all 3 players in 3 rounds, with the team of 3 capable of selecting a new location each time. Again, I get the idea of what they were going for with this one, but it is essentially luck-based for the single player, and by extension, it is kind of luck-based for the team of 3 too. It just depends on what people pick, really. It's just kind of hard to review this one as a minigame of skill, and is not just one you can really depend on winning. Also, it is kind of broken if you're playing with 2 human players on the team of 3, because if more than one person makes it to the final round, they can literally just communicate to hide in each of the 2 remaining locations, and just assure a minigame win, which is pretty unfair to the solo player if the team gets in that scenario. Number 59, Game Guy's Magic Boxes. This game is literally the minigame equivalent of a coin flip. 50-50 shot of getting double your coins, or losing all of them. I do kind of appreciate the idea of gambling further for a double or nothing shot, as it can add an interesting dynamic to the game in progress if you're looking to potentially steal or secure a Coinstar lead, but it's still a luck-based minigame, and I still have it near the bottom as a result. Number 58, Slapdown. This game is all about having the quickest reflexes and the ability to pay attention under pressure as you try to slap your hand down when the correct match is shown. Buzz in too early or when the wrong picture shows and you'll be losing those battle game coins. Seriously, why are games like this always battle games? Regardless, the fake outs are annoying and I don't really like this minigame as a result. Number 57, Slot Cinch. This is an interesting case of a minigame where I'd much rather play this with computer players than with human players. Basically, you and your partner try to match the same picture on your blocks and get or lose points based on the match you make. Timing the block isn't the hardest thing in the world, but if you and your partner are a little off the mark and don't have the same type of timing, it can be an exercise in frustration. I'd almost prefer it if you got points individually, without getting matches, and then your team points get added together at the end. Or maybe whenever you do get a match, you get like extra bonus points or something. I don't know, just not really a fan of the dynamics of this game, and even if it is better with computer players, I still wouldn't say it's that amazing either. Average at the absolute best. Number 56, Spotlight Swim. This game sucks for the single player. I honestly would like the idea otherwise though, but if the team of 3 is smart and can follow along with the bubble trails the solo player leaves behind when diving underwater, there's like no way the team can lose. Number 55, Cheep Cheep Chase. This game got a bit of a boost after the first time I ranked Mario Party 3 because this game was at the absolute bottom of that first list. Yes, I do think it's better than I initially gave it credit for, but I do think it's still problematic. However, I think when I ranked the series initially, I was thinking too much about how I feel about the game when I play with computer players and not really human players. Like Bowser Toss, practically impossible against hard AI. Against human players, I do think this is a much fairer challenge because it does require some skill of avoiding the spike bombs, but it still suffers from skateboard scamper syndrome. Plus, at the core, it is a button masher, and a very tiring button masher at that. Not the worst Mario Party 3 minigame, but still fairly low on the list. Number 54, Awful Tower. I think the developers kind of did this game dirty just by the title alone. Seriously, this tower is quite awful, to say the least. The main problem with this game is really just the controls. Left and right vertical platforming with the N64 control stick just feels awkward as hell, and I swear, some of the hammer throws you have to avoid just seem impossible to dodge at times. The positives? Well, you can get some coins, even if you don't win, I guess. Number 53, Picking Panic. Maybe this one should be a bit higher, because as a 2 versus 2 game, I do think the idea is fine, but depending on your chemistry with your partner, it can be a little hard to get in the zone with this one. In a way, this is kind of like Cake Factory from Mario Party 2, just with stricter timing inputs. Each cherry you pass is a different weight and throwing arc, and if your partner isn't grasping the correct timing, whether they are throwing or catching, well, let's just say that it's not terribly uncommon to see a score of 0 on this game. When you and your partner get in the rhythm, it can be fun, but when you don't, it can be very irritating. Number 52, Bouncin' Trounce. Here is another game that has climbed the ranks pretty significantly after the first time I ranked this game. It's no longer in the bottom 10, but I still consider it below average for the most part. This is a pretty interesting take on the bumper balls concept, focusing more on bouncing and spinning to knock away your opponents as opposed to just straight up running into them. But the movement of your character, along with trying to recover from getting attacked, can be very awkward, and once the floor starts breaking away, it's pretty easy to get a bit panicked and lose your footing as you and your opponents race to be the first one to strike efficiently and take the win at just the right moment. They definitely fixed the stalemate problem of bumper balls, but this game just has a much different and arguably larger problem now of just controlling your character and finding any instance of stability and security. Number 51, Winner's Wheel. This is a boring item minigame. You press a button, you get an item. That's pretty much it. The stakes are low, so even if you lose, it's not a big deal, but it's still boring. Number 50, Bobbing BOW-LOONS. You better hope the first item is good, because it's really hard to assure yourself of any items after the first balloon. Definitely better than Winner's Wheel, since it's a little more interesting and has a little more assurance of getting a specific item, but not much. The ending cutscene for missing an item is kind of funny, I guess. Number 49, Stardust Battle. Here we have the finale of the Mario Party 3 story mode, a battle with the Millennium Star. It's a pretty interesting fight. I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's not really great either. Mario Party 4 definitely set a much higher and better bar after all, but literally this fight is avoiding falling stars, waiting for them to cool off, and then chucking them straight at the star's silver mustached face, with constantly changing star speeds and terrains to deal with. The absolute worst part of this minigame though, and this is something I'll be talking about later with another minigame, picking up objects is ridiculously hard to do in this game. I don't know what it is, but you literally have to be facing the stars perfectly to pick them up. If your angle is just off by a little bit, you will not pick up the star, will likely miss the hit on that cycle, and need to repeat the cycle again for another shot. It is irritating and not a fun aspect of this minigame. Number 48, 3-Door Monty. This battle game is actually kind of similar to Slapdown in a lot of respects, but because there are less options to pick and no fake outs to deal with, I'd much prefer this game over the other one. Still in my lower half of minigames in Mario Party 3, but at least it tests a little more than just your reflexes in this case. Number 47, Hand Line and Sinker. It's almost like they took Bob-omb Barrage in Mario Party 2 and switched the roles, putting the team of 3 in the water and turning them into fish, and giving the single player a fishing rod. I honestly don't hate this minigame, but safe to say I'd rather play Bob-omb Barrage over this one any day. Moving with the team of 3 can be pretty awkward, as you can only move forward by pressing the A button and changing the direction with the control stick, and you can't really do both at the same time efficiently. This game is definitely easier as the solo player, but even getting the right cast can be a bit deceptive at times too. I've gotten to the point where as the fish, I can cheese the computer players in this game pretty easily, which does feel pretty good and gives me the same rush I normally get from Bob-omb Barrage, but against a competent human player, I'd definitely feel more like a fish out of water. Also, 60 seconds is just way too long to be playing this minigame. Number 46, The Beat Drags On. Oh wait, that's not the name of this minigame. There we go, sorry about that. Well, even if that wasn't the right name of the minigame, it definitely feels that way sometimes. I'm cutting this game some slack this time though, as this was definitely in my bottom 10 back in 2016, but I still have a lot of issues with this one, and it's not just the pacing of it either. My issue with this one is the fact that you and your opponents can literally take this game to the very end after strings and strings of Baza and Zaba and Bazab just for the game to end in a draw, and then you literally spend minutes on a game that didn't amount to anything. And hey, that's the reason I had such an issue with bumper balls in the last 2 games. It's just not fun devoting so much time to a game that just amounts to nothing, especially when you really put your brain to memorizing lines and lines of absolute Zaba, Baza, Zaba, Zaba, Bazaba. Seriously, it just sounds like my brain is literally turning into mush right now. Number 45, Pump Pump and Away. This was another game that I feel like I had to reevaluate because I was judging it too much with my experiences against computer players and not really against human players, when CPUs have a much better aptitude of how to manage their pumps optimally. After all, this is really no different than Mario Party 2's balloon burst when you really think about it, although it's less about getting your balloon to a certain point and more about trying to get through as many pumps as possible before the time limit is up. I think what makes this game worse, though, is that at least in Balloon Burst, it gives you a visual representation of how close you were to the end, and by extension, how well you were doing. For this game, you don't really know how well you did until it's over, and by that point, it's too late to really fix anything. Whether you got the rhythm right early on and lost it, whether you've got it by the end, or even if it was more the fault of your partner and not yourself, there is just no way to be sure. And that just makes it harder to practice, even if you set out to get better at it. Number 44, Hey Batter Batter. It's a one-shot swing for an item, and if you aren't ready for the speed of Baby Bowser's pitch, you aren't getting a single thing. I do like the idea for this, and it's technically not too punishing since it is just for an item, but one shot is kind of unfair if you don't know the timing. After all, the saying isn't one strike and you're out. You should get 3 chances, and once you get an item, you're done. That's simple. Also, kind of dumb that pop flies can happen, which also results in getting no item either. Yeah, that's kind of dumb. Number 43, Swinging with Sharks. I put this one just ahead of the last item minigame because I actually find it easier to get an item in this one, but that random failure can still happen, and it's hard to know when exactly you need to end your swing if you aren't aiming for something specific. Number 42, Ridiculous Relay. I like the idea of every player having a unique role, even on a team of 3, but it's not without some issues. There's a reliance on button mashing for some of the players, and I also find the single player's job of using the glider to be kind of finicky, making it really hard to navigate around and in between the bullet bills. The spider machine controls can also be a bit awkward, but strangely enough, that's not my main issue with this game. I mean, at least it fits the theme of it being a ridiculous vehicle for a ridiculous race. At least it has that going for it. Number 41, Game Guy's Sweet Surprise. We're actually at the point of the list where I start considering games to be okay. And surprisingly enough, even though I hate Game Guy, I don't entirely hate this minigame. I feel like the odds are fairly pronounced here, and the higher the small chomp multiplier is, the less likely he's going to win. So choosing the big chomp is actually a very safe option. But if you want to test your luck, the option of the small chomp is there, and a ×4 ×8 odds does give you something to think about. Still luck-based, but I'd rather have this one over the lower 2 ranked minigames for Game Guy. Number 40, Etch and Catch. I don't really know how to feel about this one. The movement controls of your character are awkward, and coming together with your partner isn't always reliable, especially when the toad stamp has a mind of its own and moves around too. It's not the worst 2 vs 2 minigame, but I've definitely played better. It's okay at best. Number 39, Boulder Ball. Again, another average at best minigame. It really comes down to how decisive the single player can be with how they throw their boulders, and how well the team of 3 can react to those very same throws. Never been too excited to play as either side in this game, but I wouldn't say it's a bad minigame either. Number 38, Puddle Paddle. The only good thing about this game is that it's a coin collectathon, so you will get something for your trouble even if you have issues working with your teammate. Your gains will heavily depend on how friendly Hammerbro decides to be with you, which makes it a tad luck-based. Number 37, Log Jam. Hopefully the player placing the log is good under pressure, because they will be the one who set the pace for this minigame, and how your team will perform. The chopper definitely gets a little more time to react though, which is why I generally prefer to play with them, but I don't think this is a bad minigame. I just think Looney Lumberjacks from Mario Party 2 had a better log cutting premise. Number 36, Coconut Conk. Again, this one is pretty average for me, but I feel like it can be fun when things work out. Being on the team of 3 can be a little tedious with players accidentally jumping and ground pounding on each other, but it does feel good when things come together, and sometimes the chaos can lead to distractions for the solo player and catch them off guard. The single player has to be kind of careful, as their hitbox may feel bigger than it looks, but I think it can be a fair test of skill for them when it comes to finding the perfect place to avoid the coconut attacks, or the conks, if you will. Number 35, Locked Out. I may catch some grief for this one, but the reason this game is located so close to the middle and not higher is for the same reason Stardust Battle was ranked so low. Picking up objects is the bane of my existence in Mario Party 3. Seriously. And it sucks because this game is actually pretty cool conceptually. It's pretty much the musical mushroom and dizzy dancing of this game, but this time it adds rounds to keep the game going and prevents it from being a 3 to 5 second minigame, which is exactly what I asked for with those games I previously mentioned. However, being unable to accurately pick up items makes this game more frustrating, especially since it is a battle game. If you for some reason don't pick up the correct key because you were just a fraction off of facing the right way when pressing the button, you'll miss the key, you'll be unable to move for a second, allowing another player to jump in and take the key, leaving you in the dust even if you aim for the right object to begin with, meaning you'll lose coins because, once again, it's a battle game. I also feel like even if a player does get the key, they don't lose too much speed or momentum either, so if someone does lag behind or make a mistake, they're just out of luck, and that really sucks. They can try to attack the players to get the key back or knock the key loose of their grasp, but much like grabbing the key, it's hard to even land those punches if they're heading straight for the doors anyway. Aside from those issues though, I do really like the idea here. I just wish it would have been done just a bit differently to compensate for its less than polished controls. Number 34, Foul Play. Pretty much the same type of game as Locked Out when you really think about it, but I feel like the margin of error here is a little more reasonable. Plus, there are only 2 players with a moving target AI, so it feels more balanced here as both players will likely have issues picking up the chicken. But yeah, this game is okay, picking up controls and weird camera angles aside. Number 33, Swing and Swipe. It's an item freebie, it's an item freebie, it's an item freebie. That's all I have to say. Number 32, Dory Dip. This is my favorite item minigame in Mario Party 3, and it's pretty much give me a break from Mario Party 2. However, I feel like the timing is way more reasonable here, and it's not too hard to aim for an item you want. It's not as much of a guarantee as the last item minigame, but it's probably for the best that it isn't. Plus, it's a cute reference to Super Mario 64 and the cute blue subterranean dinosaur DORRIE, which is always a positive in my book. Number 31, THWOMP Pole. I used to look kind of negatively at this game for a long time because I had a hard time winning against hard CPU players, but at the core, there is nothing really wrong with this game. The team of 3 probably seems like they have the advantage because they only have to police one button, but I feel like the solo player will generally be more focused and more reaction driven because they have full control over their thwomps. Not an amazing game, but it's fine for what it is. Number 30, HYDRANTS. I've said it before, I do like 2 versus 2 games where both players on a team have a different role, but only when they're done right. For this one, I'm kind of back and forth on it. I definitely prefer being in control of the hose, as pumping the water might feel a bit mindless at times, but I don't think this game is Torpedo Targets levels of bad. Also, here's a tip, if you're on the hose, don't spread the water unless there are a bunch of flames circulating in front of you. It's actually more efficient to just hose the flames normally and try to get multiple flames at once when they're on top of each other, as the water is more focused and will get rid of them faster. Number 29, Frigid Bridges. This is another minigame that I've cut a lot of slack on over the years because my old hatred of this game stems from playing with near-perfect hard computer AI as opposed to human players, where I feel like everyone would be on a more even playing field. I do think this type of game is done better in future Mario Party titles when you don't have to deal with N64 control stick or even icy paths, but I strangely don't feel like it's that hard to stay on as long as you're careful with your movements. Plus, since you have to traverse the path 3 times back and forth, you'll get in a rhythm where you can pick up the pace a little bit on future trips, which should gain back some ground if you're lagging behind a bit. Number 28, Ice Rink Risk. This is a pretty decent survival game. The ending of this game can be pretty crazy though when you make it to the final 10 seconds and 3 spiny shells are bouncing around. However, just do your best to survive, make sure you jump smart, and try not to get too overwhelmed, as chances your opponents will be just as on edge as you are. What holds this game from being higher though is the fact that the location of the dropping shells are random, which can mess you up if you just so happen to be standing in a bad location, which is a bit unfortunate if it takes you out of this game early. Number 27, Crowd Cover. This is another reaction-based minigame, and I do think it's better than 3-Door Monty and Slapdown. All you have to do is pay attention to the differences in the 3 answers, and pick the one that matches the photo in the middle. If you are good at noticing details, this should be a breeze, and if you aren't, you may just have a little bit of a difficulty here. At least the differences are pretty easy to spot though. Number 26, Game Guy's Lucky 7. It's actually kind of interesting that a game of chance is so far up the list here, but I actually kind of have fun with this one. I guess my reasoning for this is that while it is a luck-based minigame, there's a lot of different possibilities and win conditions here, so the margin of victory never really feels that far out of reach. And if you just so happen to reach step number 7, you'll get a huge payday out of it. I also just love games like Blackjack where you have a choice of hitting or staying, so I think that kind of helps with this one. I may not be a huge fan of Game Guy, but if I do happen to hit his space, this is definitely the game I'm hoping for. Number 25, Rockin' Raceway. This is a pretty interesting racing minigame that's really only held back by the fact that it's the same course layout every single time, and once you find the optimal strategy for getting the speed carrots and avoiding the ones that spin you out, you should be good to go. The trick is maintaining a good pace without tiring out your horse, and most importantly, paying attention to your own progress and not your opponent's. It's not the best racing minigame in Mario Party 3, but it has some fine merits. Number 24, PARASOL PLUMMET. It's a coin collectathon, and it's alright. You have a fair chance to get a decent number of coins, and I don't think the controls are too unreasonable if you try to stay towards the middle of the screen and ascend when you see something good coming. The other players could get in your way, and sometimes a surprise hammer might knock you around, but there's plenty of time to get something good here. Number 23, All Fired Up. A pretty intense survival battle minigame that can actually be a bit tricky, but at least it fires you up to do your best and try to come out on top. Honestly, what prevents this game from scoring higher for me is really just the cross formation with how sporadic it moves, and sometimes the circle formation if you get stuck in the center and need to get out. I guess what balances it out is the fact that every player has to deal with that challenge, so it's pretty irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. However, I think 23rd place is still a pretty solid placement for a pretty good battle minigame. Number 22, Storm Chasers. This is an interesting concept for a battle game where the main goal is to water your plant the most, but the game itself turns into a mad dash into the rain cloud where you and your opponents will be viciously crowding around the rain trying to get the most out of it. And you know, that strangely works pretty well for a battle game. The rain cloud is random, so there is no preset movement, at least as far as I can tell, and even if you have a bad start, it's still worth to keep on trying just in case you have a better run during the latter moments of the game. So, yeah, I think this game is actually pretty good, all things considering. Number 21, Curtain Call. Here we have a test of your memory, or a test to see how well you can verbally memorize the order of Boo, Goomba, and Koopa without the words and patterns becoming incredibly redundant and each word sounding the exact same by the end of each round. I like this game because it's a pretty solid test of your memory, but also with how well you pay attention to specific details, like when I asked you to name the second character from the right instead of just the left, which does get you to think a little more about what you just memorized, and also gives you a decent amount of time to think about your answer before you lock it in. I suppose there's also a layer of strategy to this as well, since you can change your answer and try to fool your opponents if they happen to be cheating off of you, but like I said for Roll Call and Mario Party 2, I'd rather just lock in my answer when I'm sure, just to make sure I get my reward at the very end. Number 20, Baby Bowser Bonkers. I'm glad they went back to this concept for a minigame because this one has always reminded me of Whack-A-Plant from Mario Party 1. It's just now a dual minigame instead of a one-player game. I do wish it felt a little more like Whack-A-Plant because controlling your bounces after landing on each Baby Bowser has always felt a bit stiff to me. But for the most part, this is a pretty good dual minigame. Number 19, POPGUN Pickoff. Another pretty decent dual minigame that tests your reflexes and how well you control your itchy trigger finger. Make sure your crosshair is where you want to aim at, just so you don't accidentally shoot Mr. Toad, and try not to follow your opposition too much either, just so you can try to get as many points as you can before the end of the game and not share too many targets with your opponents. Number 18, Treadmill Grill. You honestly would think that the treadmill would cause some issues here, but actually this game feels pretty nice as a survival game. It's not the best survival game of Mario Party 3, and I still probably favor Bombs Away from the previous two installments, but I think it's relatively fine to manage, and it even starts to bring the heat a little bit at the end when the platform gets smaller. It's also not as clunky and inaccurate as Lava Tile Isle felt in Mario Party 2, which is an automatic win in my book. Number 17, Mario's Puzzle Party. Mario Party 3 was the first game to introduce a Tetris-style puzzle minigame, and considering it's in the top 20 out of 70, it honestly did pretty well here. However, I wouldn't be surprised if some people may think this placement is a bit low considering how popular this minigame actually is, because I feel this is a pretty well-loved minigame, and honestly, I'm pretty positive about it too. However, of the block puzzlers in Mario Party, I can't help but feel like other minigames in the series are more enjoyable than this one in particular. And I think they really start holding their own later on when they become extra modes as opposed to regulation end-of-turn minigames. For this game though, I think it's a really fun race to 100 points, and I really like the notion of every player having their own board and control over their own destiny. The downside of this is that the board is relatively small, making it hard to set up combos, and a large part of the game is pressing the quick drop button in rapid succession, waiting until your board gets filled before making matches, or even just getting a bunch of combos along the way of getting there, which means there's not a lot of strategy for this one and can feel pretty brainless at times. I do like what they were going for with this though, and like I said, this does get improved in future Mario Party minigames. There's also a one-player variant of this minigame as well, which is pretty solid, but it's not too different from what you play in the 4-player version, so I won't be grading it separately. It's good to have though. Number 16, River Raiders. This is honestly the best coin free-for-all and 1 vs 3 minigame in Mario Party 3, and I think it's the best because it's simple and straight to the point. You travel down some water rapids and move yourself around to get coins. The single player is in front and has full range of movement for themselves, but also has a slight effect in how the team of 3 will move too, as well as a larger shell to pick up coins with. The team has more bodies to receive coins, but they're essentially only able to get whatever the single player misses, and they even have to be in the right position to grab something if the solo ranger will even allow it. I would give a slight edge to the single player here, in terms of having more control over the game, but I wouldn't say I've seen too many games where the coin gains were completely one-sided for either side. It's a pretty good minigame, and likely the game I'll be hoping for whenever it appears on the roulettes. Number 15, Cosmic Coaster. This game really reminds me of Handcar Havoc, but I feel like it's Handcar Havoc done right. There's no more button mashing, there's no way to fall off your vehicle, it's just simple make your way to the end while dodging as many obstacles as possible. Dodging obstacles can be a little tricky at times, because in those instances where you need to move yourself in between two barriers, but I feel like it's not too hard to get a handle on. Also, if you don't think you can get the win, there are coins you can collect along the way to make sure you don't leave empty-handed. Where was that in Handcar Havoc? Number 14, Waterworld. This game gives me major Slot Car Derby vibes, and it's nice to see it ranked pretty similarly to Slot Car Derby as well. Ultimately, I do think this game controls better, and the fact that you no longer have to depend on the finicky nature of the N64 control stick for your acceleration definitely helps. But I do kind of wish the course was more interesting and just had more variations in general, because I do think this game is really fun despite its very simplistic nature, and it can lead to some very fun and heated races. Number 13, Dizzy Dinghies. I'm actually kind of surprised I have this special case minigame ranked so high, but I honestly think it's pretty fun. It's similar in nature to Driver Z and Mario Party 2. You're just setting new records and high scores and a couple of different course variants. But the courses aren't as insane as they are in Driver Z, and there are even a couple of different vehicles you can choose from as well. It's a case of, with Driver Z, I wish the courses were a little less extra, but with Dizzy Dinghies, I almost wish there was more to it, because it controls very well and feels pretty good to cruise on. Number 12, Aces High. We go from water to the sky in an awesome aerial shoot-'em-up. Overall, this minigame is pretty fun and is a nice take on the last remaining player wins trope. And unlike its ground-based cousin in Mario Party 2 Shell Shocked, I find it's harder to double team another player, which makes this game a little more fair in my eyes. However, while the concept is great and the controls feel good, I feel like this game is pretty prone to draws if the players play too passively. Sometimes locking down a player can be pretty tricky, since their models are pretty small, and even though you can use homing ammo to lock them down, it can be avoided if they pay attention and focus on doing sharp turns. Despite that only flaw though, it's a pretty good minigame and just barely misses out on making the top 10. Number 11, Toadstool Titan. And here is another awesome minigame that just barely misses out in getting the top 10 in the form of Toadstool Titan, or its more modern name, Mush Pit. I like Toadstool Titan better. In this game, all 4 players look for a mushroom that is hiding in one of the brick blocks. That mushroom will make one of the players giant and capable of knocking someone out of the game. It's a mad dash and stomp to see who will be the last remaining player. I think what makes this game great is not just the fact that it's a reference and callback to how mushrooms work in the Mario series, but how many layers this game actually has, and the fact that even if you are unable to find and obtain the mushroom at first, you're not necessarily out of the game yet. If you can avoid the gigantic rampage for a few seconds, the player shrinks and the blocks reset and you do it all over again. And with less players, the chances actually get better to find the mushroom too, so there's plenty of opportunity to make a comeback and steal the win. When you're giant, try to keep your composure and don't fret if you miss a player when you charge them. Just try to predict where they're going next and try to catch them off guard with a fake out. The only thing that does kind of hold this game back is just the general control of it, and I feel that's largely in part of the N64 controller and the looser control you have over your character, as this game feels a lot better to me in both Top 100 and Mario Party Superstars. However, it just goes to show you that this game is pretty solid to actually make a comeback twice in future installments. It's pretty great. Number 10, Silly Screws. We start our top 10 rounding out with a duel minigame, and I gotta say, Mario Party 3 in general did a pretty good job with duel minigames, especially when you consider that we have 2 others to look out for as well. Silly Screws I wouldn't say is fantastic by any means, but I like how even though it may appear to be a button masher, it's actually more about control and trying to find just the right amount of finesse to line up your screws perfectly so you can move on to the next one and overtake your opponent. Definitely feels more like a race than a button masher if I'm being honest. Number 9, Vine with Me. On the subject of racing duels, we have this game that also cracks the top 10. Fine With Me is a game that honestly just feels really good to get right. All you have to do is press A when the vine you're on and the next vine make contact, or is close to making contact, and keep moving until the finish line. I think what heightens this minigame though is the level of optimization you can do with this, and what I mean by this is sometimes you can actually press the button a bit earlier than what you would expect, and still make progress and potentially even get a cycle ahead of your opposition. It gives the game a nice little risk-reward scenario and makes it feel bigger than just, you know, swinging on vines. Number 8, Chip Shot Challenge. I bet some of you guys were not expecting to see this game here. What I mean by this is I actually had Chip Shot Challenge as my number 1 minigame the first time I ranked Mario Party 3, and as you can see, it dropped a little bit this time around. I still really like this game, being a huge golf fan and everything, but I am definitely way more aware of this game's biggest flaw, and that flaw is the entire concept of this being a turn-based minigame. Normally this wouldn't be a problem, but considering that every player that doesn't go first has a chance to analyze the first person's shot and copy a perfect chip shot if it happens, kind of forces this game down that route instead of having everyone on the same equal playing field. Now, one thing the developers did to try and balance this out is put the players in order of their current placement based on the overall game's leaderboard, assuming you're playing on Battle Royale anyway. And while I do like that attention to detail, it still feels a bit unbalanced, and I kind of wish something was done just to make it a little more fair for everyone and not make copying as effective as a strategy as it is. Aside from that though, I do like the challenge of trying to get as close to the hole as possible, and the fact that there are lots of different hole and green variations does give this game a lot of variety. It's still a great minigame in its own right, just has a flaw that's a little too big to ignore. Number 7, Tick-Tock Hop. If you watched the Mario Party 2 list and saw how high Hot Rope Jump was, you'd naturally assume that Mario Party 3's dual counterpart would score pretty high as well, and you'd be pretty correct in that assessment. Tick-Tock Hop is pretty much the same idea. You're riding on the hour hand of a clock and you're jumping over the minute hand as it comes sweeping around you. The only difference here between this game and its Mario Party 2 cousin, aside from the lack of 2 other players, is the fact that you are completely at the mercy of how the minute hand moves. Sometimes it'll go clockwise, sometimes it'll go counterclockwise, it may speed up or slow down, sometimes the minute hand will stop and the hour hand will move instead, or sometimes both hands will move. It can be quite the chaotic minigame, and honestly, I kinda like it because of that. I think I ultimately prefer the more simplistic nature of Hot Rope Jump, just because I don't have to think as much and I won't have to worry about getting caught off guard with a sudden knee-jerk movement, but I think without question, this is easily the best duel minigame in Mario Party 3, and I kinda wish this had an endless mode featured in some way. Thankfully it does that in Mario Party Superstars, but wasn't as lucky here. Number 6, Eyesore. I'm a sucker for minigames that reference events or actions from other Mario games, and when the developers created a minigame that featured the idea of running around a Mr. Eye enemy until it dizzies itself out, I thought, hey, that's actually pretty clever. I have this ranked as my number 1 battle game in Mario Party 3, and yeah, I will admit that it's a pretty recent appreciation for this minigame in particular. I used to get annoyed with how easy it was to run into POPGUN or even the eyeball himself with too many tight circles. However, over time I've realized that you just have to pace yourself with this one. When a fireball is about to appear, slow down a little bit so it doesn't drop on your head, and don't get too close to the eye, but keep yourself moving by making more diamond or square shapes in the interest of not making contact. Most of the time, if you lose this minigame, it's likely due to panicking after hitting too many obstacles, and not from going too slow, so try to keep that in mind. Number 5. The next minigame is far from perfect. In fact, I'd say that it's actually quite imperfect. Clinching the bottom of the top 5 is none other than Picture Imperfect, the facelift of Mario Party 3. Gone are the days of stretching out a face to make it look silly, because now we have an action block that allows us to pick whatever facial features we want for our victim, and we can make them look as crazy as we want them to be. Okay, so the actual goal is to match the face in the center of the game board, not to actually make the face look weird, but making weird faces is honestly kind of this game's biggest charm. It's a game where if I make a mistake, I'm honestly laughing more than feeling bad about not winning, and that's a good feature, especially in a game like Mario Party. It's not too hard to pick the right features for the first few selections, but for the last roulette, don't be surprised if it feels more like luck than actual skill, because much like Toad in a Box from Mario Party 2, the roulette moves really fast. I also kind of wish there were more faces to choose features for as well, as there are only 3, Toad, Wiggler, and Mario. Still though, it's a very solid and memorable minigame from Mario Party 3. Number 4. When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's Eats a Pizza, the best 2 vs 2 minigame here in Mario Party 3. There's not a lot to say about this one because it's simple and straight to the point. Which team can eat more of their pizza half in the time limit, or which team can finish their half first. Both you and your partner have to strategically plan out how to attack your side of the pie, dividing up your path appropriately so you don't interfere with each other and so you don't leave too many crumbs behind that you have to take long trips back to clean up any loose specks. Yeah, you move faster when you're only on the plate, but if the other team is more efficient with their clearing, they can always snipe the victory from you at the last second. There may be a bit of a button mashing involved with this one as well, but the mashing here never really bothered me that much, because precision of movement is also very important, and it never really felt like extensive and fast mashing ever made too much of a difference in speed anyway. I wouldn't say this game quite gets the same high marks as Sky Pilots from Mario Party 2, given that game was my runner-up pick for best minigame, but it's definitely one of the best 2 vs 2 games in the history of this franchise. Number 3. We've had our fair share of memory games in this series so far, but the one that stands out for me the most is this one, my number 3 pick in Mario Party 3, Messy Memory. This game shows you a pair of shelves with 10 items and objects featured on them, ranging from hats and other items and accessories from the Mario series. Your goal is to arrange the shelves in the correct order of all the items that were featured before the Toads mess the items up and knock them on the ground. Some of the puzzle is done for you, but if you want to win this minigame, you're going to need to use that brain of yours. However, I've always been under the belief that memorizing 10 items is not really that difficult, and the way you can memorize each sequence can actually be kind of creative and intuitive. You can do it by type, whether it's a clothing item or an object, by color, by general positioning. Heck, one of my methods for remembering placements is to make a short story about a 3 or 4 item sequence. For example, if the order is Mario hat, Yoshi egg, hammer, and DK tie, I say to myself, Mario broke an egg with a hammer while wearing a tie. Methods like that can really enhance the enjoyability of a minigame like this, and I think it shows how well conceived this game is. One final note, much like roll call in Mario Party 2 and curtain call in this game, there is an aspect of cheating that can occur, with another player copying off of you. However, since the sequence here is a bit longer and copying each individual item would be a bit slower, I think it is a less serious crime here, and not a strategy people should bank on as much. Plus, if you are done early, feel free to close your curtain to mess up your competition. Number 2. We only have 2 more games to judge here in Mario Party 3, and if you know what those are without looking at a list, good job, you're pretty vigilant and good at keeping track of things. What's another game where those skills can come in handy? Well, let's talk about pipe cleaners. Pipe cleaners might seem like the most out-of-nowhere selection for this top 5 list, as I don't think it was even in my top 10 the last time I ranked this game, but I do think this game has grown on me quite significantly. In a game that tests reflexes, I think a whack-a-mole style game of this nature is absolutely perfect, and it doesn't feel incredibly difficult to put out a good performance, even if your reflexes aren't the fastest. It's all about getting a feel for which button combo corresponds to which pipe, and when you realize the button placements for the A and B inputs are in the same position as they are on the N64 controller, it's easy to know which pipe you are hitting without even looking at the controller. Also, I find that hitting the Baby Bowser targets is actually pretty lenient. Sometimes, even if you swing at one as it's leaving the field, you will still get credit for it, and I think that's a good way to keep a player motivated during their session. Even as I've aged quite significantly over the last 20 years that this game has been out, and my reflexes have gotten more shot to hell in that time frame, this is a game I could still easily put out perfect scores for. And even in multiple players do the same, everyone will win the 10-coin prize, so it's rewarding for everyone if they hone their skills enough. Number 1. And now, let's move on to the number 1 position. Despite taking a runner-up slot during the first Mario Party 3 ranking, this game has proven itself and has continued to prove itself as a king among minigames. There is a reason this minigame got brought back in both Top 100 and Mario Party Superstars, and I think it's quite simply the fact that of all free-for-all knockout games, this is perhaps the most definitive one. I am of course talking about the 4-player Battle Royale minigame known as Snowball Summit. Now, what makes this game stand out in a much more positive way compared to games like Bumper Balls and Bombs Away and Shell Shocked? I think the answer is quite simply its varying strategies and its uniqueness. You can surprisingly play this game in a large variety of ways. You can be super aggressive and offensive and try to knock out everyone as quickly as you can, or you can play the longer defensive game and wait for your chance to strike when your opponents are vulnerable. It's amazing the number of options you have when your field of play is actually kind of small considering. Going the offensive route? Try bowling your opposition with smaller snowballs to constantly stun them and make it so they can't build a snowball of their own. Or try to trick others into thinking that you're making a big snowball just to send it rolling a second or two early to catch them off guard. And if you are playing defensively, build your snowball not as a weapon, but as a way to protect yourself with. Or if you are in the crosshairs of another player, try getting behind them so they constantly have to shift directions to face you, giving you a chance to construct a small snowball and knock them down, and get rid of their own weapons so you can proceed to stun lock them and knock them out in their own window of vulnerability. It's incredible how well this minigame works and how much fun it can truly be, and it's honestly a pretty unique idea for a minigame concept, taking a very real-world idea of a snowball fight and turning it into a Mario Party minigame. Since I first played Mario Party 3 in 2001, this game has always been one of my favorites, and I think it's truly a classic of Mario Party minigames. And for that, I think it's no question that this is the best minigame of Mario Party 3. Well folks, we did it. We made it through the N64 era of Mario Party. I want to once again apologize for how long it took me to make this video, as I did really want to have this video up in March, but with 70 minigames to rank, especially after ranking 50 games in Mario Party 1, 60 in Mario Party 2, and 48 Mario Kart 8 Deluxe tracks, safe to say, ranking videos can take a lot of mental energy out of you, especially when trying to split the tiniest of hairs. Maybe I should try doing a shorter list of a different topic next time before heading back into Mario Party 4, just to give me a little bit of a breathing room. However, despite the mental strain, this was still a lot of fun to make for you guys, and I'm pretty happy with my ranking here. As usual, if you have your own thoughts or, God forbid, want to try ranking all of these yourself, feel free to leave your own comments down below. Just remember that this list is completely my subjective opinion, so we may not see eye to eye on everything, but I do like seeing other thoughts on the subject. And, as usual, if you are interested in more Mario Party action, join me every Friday on my Twitch channel at around 2 PM Eastern Daylight Time for my weekly Thank God It's Mario Party Friday stream. Every week I play one board of Mario Party, and every now and then I work on minigame tier lists that will ultimately become these ranking videos. I just recently did the tier list for Mario Party 4, which means Mario Party 5 would be up next, and although I don't plan on starting that too soon, feel free to keep on stopping by if you want a sneak peek on how I feel about those minigames, and if you want to give me some additional things to think about when it comes to certain ones. And with that, I think it's time we put the lid on this toy box and head off into the GameCube era of Mario Party. Thank you guys once again for watching this video, and I'll catch you on the Party Cube at a later date and time. This has been SlimKirby, party on, and I'll see you soon. Later, folks.